Namaskaram and welcome to the day 4 of the Abhijnana Shankaram series. Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Pada Shankaram Lokashankaram. The last 3 days we looked at the reason for the avataranam of the Acharya, his contributions, be it a glimpse to Sanatana Dharma, and really the tip of the iceberg in terms of understanding the Siddhanta of Advaita. Today we'll touch upon a few topics that are popularly associated with the Acharya, his life and works. The first is the date of Shankara. This is a very popular and dear topic of scholars, especially when they write books. There is always a chapter or sections dedicated to debate and argue on the date of Shankara. But I find it quite meaningless and futile because the Acharya himself has never, like many of the rishis and the poets of Bharatavarsha, has never told about his date or has never mentioned which year he was born. We don't find too much of evidence from his contemporaries and Shishyas as well. There is a popular debate of the more popularly accepted date is that of the 8th century AD, but there is also a viewpoint of 5th or 6th century BC. So you have a wide range of options, which encompass nearly 1400, 1500 years in between. Now, what does it really achieve by knowing the date of Shankara? One thing that is clear is in all the works of the Acharya, the Purva Paksha or the schools that he refutes, the viewpoints of the schools that he refutes, among them are the Bauddha and Jaina, especially the Bauddha philosophy. So definitely it was a time when the Buddhist philosophy was at its peak, or there was a proliferation of the Buddhist school. He doesn't speak of any other matas. He doesn't speak of any other religions, which probably should have got developed in later times, like Islam or Christianity, or those kind of religions had been in existence in much later years. So he doesn't speak of all that. So the only evidence probably in the works of the Acharya itself you get is that he has refuted the Buddhist viewpoint. That is all you can make out of. That is all you can gather from his own works. Beyond that, it's very difficult. Of course, scholars have mentioned and have put in different arguments and debates. But the only one line that I could say to end this debate is the Acharya himself says, Na mata na janma. I neither have a mother nor was I ever born. So he clearly makes it clear that he is that supreme being who has never born. So why are we debating on the year in which he was born? So the Acharya clearly puts an end to this argument or this debate that there is no janma, there is no mrityu. The janma and mrityu happens for the physical body that keeps coming and going. But your true identity is that of the self, which has got no birth or no death. And as I mentioned in my first session itself, the shloka of the Avatarana of Shankara says, Shambhor Murtihi Charati Bhuvane, he is still wandering amongst ourselves, roaming amongst us, walking amongst us. So, is there a time limit you can give to the Acharya? No. So, he is eternal, he is always existing. The other popular point of discussion is the mathas, the number of mathas established by the Acharya. So, it starts from the 4 mathas, Tamnaya Peethams, and then it goes on to debate the authenticity and originality of the other mathas. What we need to keep in mind is, even from the Digvijayam and from the history of the Acharya, it is clear. Right from the time of the Acharya taking the Shishyatvam or the discipleship of Govinda Bhagavat Pada and himself being called Shankara Bhagavat Pada, from that time onwards, there have been so many people who have become Shishyas of the Acharya. He had a Shishya Parampara, he had a crowd of Shishyas who used to accompany him wherever he went. And we know of the four primary disciples of the Acharya: Padmapada Acharya, Sureshwara Acharya, Hastamalaka Acharya, Totaka Acharya. But there were so many of them beyond these four, who were all direct disciples of the Acharya. Many of them could have gone ahead and later established matas, or their Shishyas could have established matas. Would you say they are non-authentic? You can never say, because they come from the Shishya Shankara Parampara. So, to determine, to say some matha is authentic or not authentic is so difficult today, because they all at some point would have got linked with the Acharya. And forget the mathas, even people like us who don't belong, who know that we clearly don't belong to the sannyasi, that parampara, or we are not in that Paramahamsa parampara, who have not taken to sannyasa, or still in the Grihastha ashrama. From our mental perspective, many of us are there who have surrendered ourselves to the Acharya and consider the Acharya as our Manasika Guru. The moment we have considered and surrendered ourselves to the Acharya, we become his Shishya, his Manasika Shishya, and we become a part of the Shankara Parampara. So it is not about just these mathas. I'm saying even other than the mathas, there are so many followers of the Acharya, his principles, his message. So again, this debate on what is the authentic matha and non-authentic matha itself becomes futile. Especially speaking about mathas like Kanchi Matha. See, when you debate on things, you need to understand what are you speaking about. Every parampara, what do you call as a parampara? You say Shankara Parampara today, you see Acharyas, Jagat Gurus belonging to the Shankara Parampara. Why? Because there was an unbroken lineage, Avichinna Parampara. There was an unbroken lineage. Had the lineage stopped at some point of time, you wouldn't have been able to see a living Jagat Guru or a living scion of that parampara today. So the fact that you are able to say something as Shankara Parampara today is because of the living Jagat Gurus, or the living seers, or the living Mahatmas in that parampara. And it is these Mahatmas and these Jnanis that keep this tradition alive. So the importance goes to the Jnanis who are living the message, living the Siddhanta that Acharya focused on, Acharya spoke about, Acharya professed. So the importance is to the Jnanis to a big extent. And the Kanchi Matha has had such great Jnanis in the Parampara. Bhagavannama Bodhendra, whom we know as one of the Trimurtis of the Bhajana Sampradaya, was a Jagat Guru of the Kanchi Matham. It is said that even the Guru of Sadashiva Brahmendra was a Mathadipati or a Jagat Guru of the Kanchi Matham. So, when you have such great Jnanis, and whom else, forget everything else, Mahaperiyava, who lived in the last century, the walking God, whom we call Nadamadum Daivam. Aren't all these people proof enough for the fact that this parampara has been kept alive through them and has landed up to here? Similarly, all other matham, Sringeri Matham, each and every Pithadipadi has been a jnani of great importance and has a place for himself in that Avichinna Parampara. In fact, the very, I shouldn't say founding of Kaladi, the revival of Kaladi is because of the 33rd Jagat Guru of Sringeri Sharada Peetham, Sachidananda Shivabhinava Narasimha Bharati Swamigal. If it not were for him, we would have not known the place called Kaladi, where the Acharya was born. The Avataranam of the Acharya happened. So it is due to his vision, his tapas, coupled with the support of the then Maharaja of Travancore that Kaladi was revived and established as the place of birth of the Acharya. And we have a temple today where we can go and pay our tributes to the Acharya. So this debates on the what is an authentic mata and non-authentic mata is futile. What you need to see are the living seers, the Mahatmas, who are examples, who are manifest Shankaras, who are manifest form of the Acharya for us today. And that is all that we need to go by. We already spoke about the karma, bhakti, jnana aspect of the Acharya in our previous sessions, so I wouldn't want to repeat them here. But the fact remains that the Acharya did explore the various avenues of reaching that supreme state, though he professed and he stood by the final ultimate state of Brahma Nirvana, of Brahma Jnana. He understood that all the people are not at that maturity to realize Brahman immediately. So he definitely accepted the paths, and he professed, he told people, he taught people the paths that will lead them to that ultimate objective or that ultimate goal. Even the later schools of Vedanta, the way I look at it, I don't look at it as oppositions or contradictions to Advaita. Though the popular understanding is that Vedanta, different schools of Vedanta, you have the Advaita school of Shankara, Vishishta Advaita school of Ramanuja, the Dvaita school of Madhva, Shuddha Advaita school of Vallabha, and so on. And all of these are different viewpoints. They try to interpret Upanishads differently, they try to interpret the Brahma Sutras differently, and they are all loggerheads to each other. That is the understanding even among the scholar community and the general understanding as well. But I don't like to look at it that way, because each Acharya is great in his own respect, in his own way. Then how do you reconcile? Are they still speaking about four different things? Maybe from a technical aspect, if you look at it and you try to analyze the text, if you try to analyze what they're trying to say, it will definitely appear to be contradictory. But it is as contradictory as for a person who is in the path of spirituality, karma or sadhana is very important, because that leads to chitta shuddhi, that leads to purity of mind. So for him, doing karma is essential. That is why even the Acharya says, Vedo nityamadiyatam taduditam karma svanushtiyata. The same sadhaka, as he moves towards chitta shuddhi, purity of mind, and at some point of time, he realizes the supreme, he goes into the path of jnana, for him karma no more appears to be essential. These two are contradictory. The two states of the same sadhaka. At one point of time, sadhana was important for him because that was his chitta shuddhi was not up to the mark. He had to come to chitta shuddhi, the purity of the mind. But now his mind is pure. It has already realized the objective of human pursuit. Now this seems trivial. This seems not required. So we are talking about two levels of maturity. We are talking about two states of maturity. They appear contradictory to each other, but they are not contradictory because they are a path. They are two milestones in the path of that sadhaka, in that sadhana. So for an external person, maybe they appear contradictory, but for the sadhaka, it is not contradictory. It is just an advancement. It is just a maturity. So all the acharyas have professed what was suitable for the society at that point of time. If temple worship and doing the rituals was essential, that was professed by those acharyas. If bringing back the supreme knowledge of the Vedas called the Vedanta or the Upanishads was essential, otherwise it would have gone into oblivion, that was essential for that acharya. And it remains undebated, undoubted, that if it had not been for Acharya Shankara, the later acharyas wouldn't have had a material to debate on. So I would say that Acharya Shankara laid the foundation and showed everybody the final goal of human pursuit, that is Brahman. You have to attain that Nirguna Brahman. The later Acharyas helped the society to mature themselves through bhakti, through prapatti, through surrender, through sharanagati, through karma, through rites, through rituals, through Krishna bhakti. All these means, their tools and instruments were given by the later acharyas so that the sadhaka moves on the path of chitta shuddhi and finally reaches the supreme Nirguna Brahman. This is how I reconcile all the acharyas. So with this, we conclude the session for today. And we shall continue with our series tomorrow. Until then, namaskar.